After my dad's funeral, my brother-in-law Richard seized control of my father's enterprise and its $500 million fortune. With arrogance dripping from every word, he declared, "Starting now, this entire operation belongs to me. All you're getting is that beat-up old van your father drove." But when I turned the ignition in that weathered vehicle, the GPS system unexpectedly came alive, directing me to coordinates my dad had programmed before he passed. My heart raced as I approached the destination. Something extraordinary was waiting for me there. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Can you believe 2026 is already here? Happy New Year to our incredible community. I hope this year delivers strength and fresh opportunities your way. If you'd like to support our channel and see more content like this, leave some love in the comments. It genuinely makes a difference in helping us expand. Now, let's get back to the story. Rain poured down relentlessly that afternoon. Richard positioned himself under an oversized black umbrella, looking more like someone celebrating a lottery than attending a family funeral. He tossed the van keys in my direction. They were corroded, jagged, and carried the stench of disrespect. "Stay in your greenhouse, Morgan," he sneered, adjusting his designer suit. "Let the real businessmen handle things." I refused to scream or shed tears. Instead, I clutched those cold keys until they dug into my skin, turned away from the empire I'd helped construct, and stepped into the driver's seat. The interior reeked of spearmint gum and old cigarettes, my father's signature scents. The sensory assault hit me the instant I shut the door, trapping me inside what felt more like a steel coffin than transportation. For just one heartbeat, my throat constricted. I wanted to collapse against the steering wheel and surrender to the grief consuming me. But then I glanced at the rear-view mirror. Richard remained on the mansion's porch's mansion, now watching my departure with a satisfied grin plastered across his face. That smirk evaporated my tears instantly. Grief became a luxury I couldn't afford. Fury became my fuel, and my tank was full. What happened when the GPS suddenly activated? You won't believe what my father had planned all along. Keep watching to find out. I twisted the key. The engine coughed and sputtered like someone drowning before roaring to life with defiant energy. I shifted the heavy transmission and accelerated, leaving the estate's gravel driveway in my dust without a backward glance. "Stay in your greenhouse," he'd said, as if nurturing life was somehow weakness. As if creating something from nothing wasn't the most challenging work imaginable. For 3 years, while cancer devoured my father from within, I was the one replacing 4 bags. I managed his morphine schedule and held his hand when agony made him forget his identity. Where was Richard during this? Playing golf, networking, running the company into mediocrity while waiting for the old man's death. Richard assumed my father was too ill to notice the abandonment. He believed the medication had clouded his judgment. But Dad saw everything clearly. He witnessed who held the basin and who clutched the checkbook. As the estate's iron gates disappeared behind me, my thoughts drifted to Samantha, my sister. She'd stood beside Richard as he humiliated me, silent and motionless. She hadn't uttered a word or made eye contact. Years ago, that silence would have devastated me. I would have called her heartless. But as I navigated the twisting coastal highway, something clicked, something colder, more clinical. Samantha wasn't cruel. She was shattered. Richard hadn't merely taken over the business. He'd colonized her mind. Across more than 10 years, he'd reframed abuse as executive pressure. He'd repackaged his narcissism as strategic brilliance. Slowly, methodically, he'd normalized his cruelty until she couldn't distinguish between a spouse and a captor. She didn't defend me because, in her reality, protecting the victim meant betraying the oppressor. She existed in a psychological prison with invisible walls, too terrified to even test the locks. I wasn't just abandoning her, I was leaving her trapped with a monster. I was approaching a highway when the dashboard flickered unexpectedly. Static erupted from the radio, slicing through the silence, and the digital clock blinked 12 o'clock repeatedly. Then the center console screen illuminated. This wasn't the original factory system, it was a contemporary GPS unit awkwardly installed into the plastic housing. One loud, piercing beep echoed through the cab. A single destination materialized on the glowing display. No street address, no location name, just 2 words pulsing in emerald text. Start here. My father's voice resonated in my memory, crystal clear. Drive safely, Mo. You already know the route. A chill unrelated to the air conditioning swept through me. The GPS was about to reveal something that would change everything. But first, I needed to follow the trail my father left behind. What I discovered next was absolutely mind-blowing. I didn't head toward my small apartment. I didn't question the mysterious coordinates. I simply followed the glowing green arrow as it guided me through winding back roads I hadn't traveled in years. The route led me away from the city lights, past abandoned industrial zones, until I reached a neighborhood I vaguely recognized, a place Dad used to visit when I was young, though I never knew why. The GPS directed me to a nondescript warehouse. From outside, it appeared forgotten, rusty corrugated metal, faded paint, weeds choking the perimeter. I parked the van, my hands trembling slightly as I killed the engine. A keypad glowed beside a side entrance. As I approached, the GPS screen changed again, displaying a 6-digit code. I entered it without hesitation. The door clicked open. Inside, my breath caught. This wasn't an abandoned building. The space was immaculate, climate-controlled, well-lit, organized with military precision. Rows of filing cabinets lined one wall. A massive desk dominated the center, covered with documents, ledgers, and labeled folders. And on that desk sat a letter with my name written in Dad's distinctive handwriting. My hands shook as I tore it open. Morgan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Richard has shown his true colors. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you directly. I needed him to believe he'd won. I needed him comfortable enough to make mistakes. Everything in this warehouse is yours now. Financial records, shadow accounting books, proof of embezzlement, forged documents, everything Richard has done to bleed my company dry over the past 5 years. I knew what he was doing. I've known for years. But I needed irrefutable evidence, and I needed to protect you and your sister until the moment was right. The company's debt is held by Sterling Financial. Arthur Sterling is an old friend. You'll find his contact information in the red folder. He's been waiting for your call. The company is leveraged, but it can be saved. You have the power to do that now. Richard thinks you're just a gardener, someone who plays with flowers and dirt. Let him keep thinking that. Underestimation is the greatest weapon you'll ever have. I trust you, Mo. I always have. Not because you're ruthless like Richard, but because you understand something he never could. Real power comes from nurturing what matters, not destroying it for short-term gain. Make him pay. Save your sister. Save what we built together. Asterisk, all my love, Dad. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of purpose. My father had given me the keys to Richard's destruction. But how could a simple gardener take down a powerful CEO? The answer was hidden in those files, and what I found would shake the entire company to its core. I spent that entire night in the warehouse, methodically examining every document my father had compiled. The scope of Richard's corruption was staggering, far worse than I'd imagined. He hadn't just embezzled money. He'd created an intricate web of shell corporations, phantom employees, and fraudulent contracts. Over 5 years, he'd systematically siphoned $40 million from the company. $40 million. And he'd been clever about it. Small withdrawals here, inflated vendor payments there. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger immediate red flags. He'd exploited Dad's illness, banking on the assumption that a dying man wouldn't notice the slow financial bleeding. But Dad had noticed everything. Every transaction was documented, cross-referenced, highlighted. There were bank statements, wire transfer records, emails discussing offshore accounts. My father had built an airtight case, brick by brick. In the red folder, exactly where Dad said it would be, I found Arthur Sterling's contact information along with a detailed letter explaining the company's financial structure. Sterling Financial held the majority of the company's outstanding debt. Loans Richard had taken out to cover his gambling losses and personal expenses. I called Arthur at dawn. "Ms. Morgan," his warm voice answered on the second ring. "I've been expecting your call. Your father was a good friend and a brilliant man. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. I managed. Did you know about everything? Your father kept me informed. He wanted to make sure the pieces were in place when the time came. I understand Richard announced himself as the new owner? That's putting it mildly. Arthur chuckled darkly. Well, he's in for quite a surprise. I'm prepared to transfer the debt holdings to you at face value. Once you control the debt, combined with the voting shares your father set aside in trust, you'll hold the majority position. What about the board? Most of them are loyal to Richard, but they're loyal to their positions more. Present them with evidence of embezzlement, and they'll turn on him faster than you can imagine. Survival instinct. We spent 3 hours on that call, mapping out the strategy. Arthur would quietly transfer the debt. I would document everything, build an irrefutable presentation, and call an emergency board meeting. One more thing, Arthur added before we hung up. Your father made me promise to tell you something. He said, tell Morgan that the best gardeners know exactly when to pull the weeds. Despite everything, I smiled. Dad always loved his metaphors. I had the evidence. I had the financial leverage. Now I just needed to spring the trap. But Richard wasn't going down without a fight, and what happened at that board meeting would shock everyone. 2 weeks later, I walked through the glass doors of Reed and Associates headquarters, the company my father built from nothing. The security guard, Miguel, did a double take when he saw me. Ms. Morgan? We weren't expecting. Emergency board meeting, I said calmly, handing him official documentation. As a shareholder, it's my right to call one. His eyes widened, but he nodded and waved me through. I'd spent those 2 weeks transforming myself. New wardrobe, sharp, professional, commanding. I'd met with lawyers, financial analysts, and forensic accountants. I'd rehearsed every word, anticipated every objection. The boardroom was on the top floor. When I stepped off the elevator, Richard's assistant, Jennifer, nearly dropped her coffee. Morgan? What are you doing here? Board meeting. Conference room, A. But Richard didn't. It's not Richard's meeting to call. The color drained from her face as I walked past. Inside the conference room, I set up quickly. Laptop connected to the projector. Documents organized. Evidence folders at each seat. I took the chair at the head of the table, Dad's old CD-Euro, and waited. Board members trickled in, confusion evident on every face. Richard arrived last, his expression shifting from surprise to fury to something approaching panic. What is this? He demanded. Sit down, Richard, I said evenly. We have a lot to discuss. You have no authority. Actually, I do. I slid a folder across the table. As of Monday morning, I control the majority of voting shares. Sterling Financial transferred all outstanding company debt to me. I own 60% of this company now. The room went deathly silent. Richard's face cycled through several shades of red. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. Dad did. And he left me more than just an old van. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up with the forged Dad's signature, obviously copied and pasted from another document. Let's start here. This is the will you presented to the lawyers, claiming total ownership. Notice anything interesting about the signature? I clicked again. Side-by-side comparison. The will signature and a birthday card signature from 3 years ago. Identical. Pixel-perfect identical. Forgery. That's prison time, Richard. You can't prove. I can. Click. The metadata appeared, showing the digital manipulation. But let's move past the amateur fraud and talk about the real crime. Click. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. Phantom employees. $40 million, Richard. That's what you've stolen from this company over 5 years. While my father fought cancer, while I held his hand through the worst pain imaginable, you were looting his legacy. Richard's face went from red to white in seconds. He was trapped and he knew it. But what happened next to his complete breakdown was something I never expected. The boardroom remained frozen. Every person stared at the screen, then at Richard, then back at the damning numbers glowing in high-definition clarity. Richard stood so violently his chair toppled backward with a crash. You're lying. This is confidential data. Where did you get? Security, I said calmly. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Sit down. Something in my voice, or maybe the absolute certainty in my eyes, made him obey. He collapsed into his chair like a puppet with cut strings. I control the debt, Richard. I purchased every outstanding loan this morning. I hold 60% of the voting shares. And I have the shadow books. I clicked through page after page of evidence. Your secret withdrawals. Your gambling debts. The shell companies funneling money to your offshore accounts. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Board members frantically flipped through the folders I'd provided, their faces growing increasingly pale. Richard looked at the screen, then at me, then at the door. I could see his mind racing, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Then he broke. Not with anger, with collapse. The narcissistic facade crumbled. The genius CEO, the self-made success story, the alpha businessman, all of it shattered into dust. He didn't attack. He started crying. Not tears of remorse, tears of self-pity. It wasn't my fault, he screamed, his voice cracking like broken glass. The market turned against us. I was trying to save the company. Your father, he jabbed a finger at me. Your father set me up? He knew. He wanted me to fail. He was testing me and I. Then he turned on Samantha, who had just entered through the back door of the conference room, drawn by the commotion. And you, he shrieked at her. You never supported me. You just wanted the money and the lifestyle. Everything I did, every risk I took was for you. For US. He was unraveling in real time, blaming everyone except himself. The powerful, arrogant man who'd humiliated me at Dad's funeral was now a small, pathetic figure in an expensive suit. His eyes finally found mine, desperate and pleading. Morgan, please. We're family. Don't do this. We can work something out. I'll pay it back, I swear. I looked at him with ice in my veins. We're not family, Richard. You're just a bad investment. I nodded to the man standing by the door, Detective Miller from the Financial Crimes Division. He'd been waiting outside the entire presentation. He's all yours, Detective. Richard was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming about conspiracies. But the real transformation was just beginning to for my sister, for the company, and for me. What happened next changed everything. Richard was escorted from the building in handcuffs, his screams about lawyers and persecution echoing through the corridor until the elevator doors mercifully slid shut. The silence that followed felt heavy, broken only by the projector's quiet hum. Samantha stood motionless near the entrance, staring at the screen where her forged signature glowed in damning clarity. She studied it for what felt like an eternity. Then her eyes met mine. Something shattered in that moment. Years of manipulation, of being told she was imagining things, of being systematically diminished so Richard could feel superior, all of it collapsed under the weight of irrefutable proof. She didn't scream. She wept, a quiet, devastating sound. The sound of someone mourning lost years they could never reclaim. I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around her. I'm sorry, she whispered against my shoulder, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Imo. It's okay, I said, holding her tightly. He's gone now. We're safe. The following weeks brought painful but necessary transformation. I temporarily assumed the CEO position, just long enough to stabilize operations. I hired Arthur Sterling as CFO and brought back Elena Rodriguez, one of the board members Dad had trusted, to serve as interim president. I discovered quickly that I didn't want the corner office. I didn't want to live in glass towers, fighting political battles and attending endless corporate functions. My place was in designing company culture, ensuring the organization's roots remained healthy, not just trimming surface-level problems. Samantha filed for divorce and began intensive therapy. The process wasn't easy. Financial entanglements were messy, and emotional scars ran deep. But for the first time in over a decade, I witnessed my sister truly smile, not the rehearsed, hollow expression she'd worn for Richard's benefit, but a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She started reclaiming herself, piece by piece. She cut her hair, changed her style, started painting again something Richard had mocked as childish. She began speaking up in family conversations, sharing opinions she'd kept buried for years. "I forgot who I was," she told me one evening over coffee. "He convinced me that my thoughts, my feelings, my dreams, none of them mattered. I became whatever he needed me to be, and I didn't even realize I was disappearing." "But you're here now," I said. "That's what matters." She squeezed my hand. "Because of you. Because Dad knew. Because you didn't give up on me." 6 months after Richard's arrest, I returned to that old van one more time. What I discovered inside would bring everything full circle in the most unexpected way. 6 months after Richard's arrest, I walked out to the parking area of Green's nursery, where I still worked part-time. The van waited there, looking completely transformed. I hadn't sold it. Instead, I'd taken it to a restoration specialist. The rust had vanished, the engine rebuilt, the exterior painted a deep, lustrous forest green. It looked classic, dignified, and proud. No longer a symbol of neglect, now a symbol of resilience. I climbed into the driver's seat. It still carried that faint spearmint scent, but the stale tobacco smell had disappeared, replaced by fresh leather and sage. I opened the glove compartment and retrieved something I'd found during restoration, an old cassette tape that had been wedged under the passenger seat. The label read, "Road Trip Mix 98, in Dad's handwriting. I pushed it into the deck. Static crackled briefly, then cleared. And then, impossibly, wonderfully, my father's voice filled the cabin, recorded over the beginning of a song. "Drive safely, Mo. You already know the way." A smile broke across my face. I shifted into gear and headed toward the coast. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and violet streaks. I wasn't just a gardener anymore. I was the guardian of a legacy, and the harvest had finally arrived. Sometimes you must play the long game to protect the people you love. Sometimes you must allow the weeds to grow tall just so you can pull them out by their roots completely, permanently. Richard was facing multiple felony charges: embezzlement, fraud, forgery. His lawyers were scrambling, but the evidence was overwhelming. Arthur estimated he'd spend at least 15 years in federal prison. The company was recovering. Under Elena's leadership and Arthur's financial expertise, we'd stabilized operations and restored investor confidence. Profits were up 18%. Employee morale had skyrocketed after we implemented the cultural changes I designed. Samantha had started her own consulting business, helping other women recognize and escape manipulative relationships. She'd found purpose in her pain, transforming her trauma into a tool for helping others. As for me, I split my time between the nursery and serving on the company's board as director of corporate culture. I designed wellness programs, mentorship initiatives, and ethical guidelines. I made sure the company my father built remained something worth protecting. I'd learned something crucial through all of this. Real power isn't about domination or control. It's about patience, strategy, and understanding when to act. It's about nurturing what matters and ruthlessly cutting away what poisons the roots. Dad understood that. He'd spent his final years not just fighting cancer, but planting seeds that would bloom after his death. He'd given me the tools, the evidence, the connections, and most importantly, the confidence to use them. If you believe truth always wins, share the story. Justice might be slow, but it's inevitable when you refuse to give up.